Now, as I grew up and went to New Salem, and then later, after I became a lawyer at age 28, moved into Springfield, Illinois. Of course, this was before I had ever grown a beard. You know, I was clean shaven, and the main characteristic that people recognized me by in those times period was that I was rather homely. Another way to be said would be that I was ugly. I was awkward and long and lank. No set of clothes that I put on fit me right because the dimensions of my body were so different from anyone else's. And so one day, I'm going to share with you a series of stories about encounters where I was addressed as an ugly man. And I hope you will find some levity in them as I tried to do myself. Now, one day I was walking in Springfield, and I was walking down a block, and I was noticing a woman came out of her house, and as I was walking on, she was coming down towards the sidewalk, which was actually made out of wood, and she kept coming down to it, and she got down to the main sidewalk from her front door about the time that I did, and she stood there and she said, "Why are you staring at me?" And I said, "Well, ma'am, I'm staring at you because you were staring at me." And she kind of looked me over and she said, "My, but you're ugly." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. It's just the way God made me." And she goes, "Would you mind not walking on my street?" Another time, a fellow came up to me and he said, "I have something that belongs to you." I said, "How could that be? We have never met before." He said, "That's true," but he said, "Years ago, I won a prize at a county fair for being the ugliest man in the county. And I was told that I had to keep that penknife that I won until I found someone uglier than myself." And he handed me the penknife and he said, "Sir, I believe that you are duly entitled to this." My last ugly story is one day when I was walking from my law office, Lincoln Herndon, across the square to the state capitol building where I had a case in the Supreme Court. You know, I argued more cases in the Illinois Supreme Court than any man has ever done. And on this occasion, someone came up from behind me, and I felt the cold and chilling feeling of him putting the end of a pistol into my cheek. I knew this was no time for any sudden moves, and I says, "What seems to be the problem?" And the voice of the person holding the pistol said, "I told myself years ago that if I ever found a man uglier than myself, I would shoot him right on the spot." Well, I detected just a little bit of levity in that voice, and so I said, "Well, would you mind if I had a look at you before you shoot me, just to make sure that I'm uglier than you?" And I felt the pistol ease out of my face, which was a very welcome feeling, and I stepped away before I turned around and looked at him and I said, "Oh, Lord, if I'm uglier than you, go ahead and shoot me. I don't want to live." Now, when I came out of my home, how many of you ever visited my home in Springfield at 8th and Jackson Street? Several of you. Thank you. Thank you. It's on the corner there, and whenever I would come out, there would always be a crowd of children there. And whether they were waiting for me or not, they would always stop what they were doing when I came out to walk to my law office or wherever I was headed, because they thought of me as kind of a living jungle gym, you know. And I would soon have a child holding on to this leg, sitting on the foot, and another one on this leg, a couple on my back and shoulders, and one on each arm. And they would get quite the ride as I went down the sidewalk, you know. And some days when I came out, there would be a child that was very upset, very quiet, head was kind of downcast. Something was really bothering me. And I would get down and I would talk with him. And the other children would kind of stand back, you know. And I would talk to this child that was so upset and try to understand what it was that was bothering them. and try to help them understand this complex world that we lived in, and how feelings get hurt and misunderstandings happen. And the other children would stand back because they knew that on another day when they were feeling sad, that they'd want to have that special time with me. And so they didn't disturb it. And now the children knew that I liked practical jokes and liked to tell stories, and they really wanted to participate in that with me. And they knew that every day I would come home for lunch when I was in Springfield, and I would come home from my law office, and I would come down to the corner, and I would turn and see Mrs. Lincoln would have lunch ready for me when I got home. Most of the time, I wasn't exactly punctual, so I wasn't exactly always ready right when I walked in, but that was the idea. And I was always thinking about something. There were so many issues in the world to be solved that required deep thinking, and I would be walking along thinking about them, you know. And I didn't need to pay attention to every detail around me. I'd walk this board sidewalk so many times. You see, whenever there was an issue that was unresolved in my mind, I could not rest with it and until I had bounded it north and south and east and west. And so all these things had to be thought through, and I spent a lot of time doing that. And so the children decided that they would play a little joke on me. And so they knew that I came down to the corner, and I would come to the corner, and I would turn, and I would walk on down to my home for lunch at my house. And so they also knew that I kept a lot of papers in my hat, that I kind of used it as a briefcase, you know. And one of the disadvantages of being kind of a deep-thinking, absent-minded person is that you can lose track of little things. And if I was in court and I wanted to produce an Exhibit A and I'd gone through all my pockets and didn't know where it was kind of embarrassing, so I would put everything in my hat so that I would know where to look for the things when I needed to find them. And so near the corner where I needed to turn to go down to my house, there was a good-sized tree. And it was in the summer season when the tree was in leaf. And I was walking along, and the boys had gotten up in the tree there, you know. And when I came around the corner, I didn't actually see them. I was trying not to see them, actually. But they took the stick and they knocked my hat off, and it fell down on the ground, and papers went out all over the place. And all of a sudden, children appeared. They had been hiding behind bushes and stuff, and they came out and they said, "Ha, ha, ha, we knocked your hat off." And I really taught those children a lesson. I took them to the store and bought them candy. I thought it was such a creative thing that they had done, and so a few weeks later, I guess they wanted to see if they could get a similar result. And this time there was a place where there was a tree on each side of the road, of the sidewalk, and they tied a string around one tree and stretched it across the board sidewalk over here. And then the tree was big enough that the boy could hide behind the tree, and when other people would walk by on the sidewalk, they would let the string hang limp, and it would just be flat on the sidewalk, and wasn't noticeable or a problem to anybody, but they were waiting for me to come by. And when I came along and got ready to turn at the corner, they had pulled the string tight, and it was just a little bit above the level of the sidewalk, you know, and you kind of see what's going to happen here. So I came along and I tripped, and the hat went flying off. And what happened then?
It flew up.
What?
It flew up.